91% of people in the United States own cars. We use them every day as tools to commute to work and for transportation of goods, and they are also used for entertainment, such as racing events and as people's personal projects. Many people are car enthusiasts who work on cars, which fuels a multi-billion-dollar industry. Even with this strong base to build from, the future of the car industry remains uncertain. Over the next few minutes, I will explain the impact of car culture and the future of the automotive aftermarket community, which fuels a $378.4 billion industry. You may think that since you're not a car enthusiast, the aftermarket auto part industry doesn't affect you. That's where you're wrong, though. Innovations in racing trickle down to consumer vehicles, making them safer and more efficient. More importantly, the industry is a huge supplier of American jobs. First, I will talk about what the aftermarket automotive industry is and its current importance. Then I will talk about the future of the industry and the current problems facing it. Lastly, I will talk about what you can do to protect the industry. What is the automotive industry and why is it important? The Britannica Encyclopedia in 2021 defined the automotive industry as companies and activities involved in the manufacture of motor vehicles, including most components such as engines and bodies. Aftermarket News in 2019 stated that more than 871,000 Americans are employed by the automotive parts manufacturing industry. The article also says the mobility industry is a significant contributor to the growth of the manufacturing and high-tech sectors, as well as stating that from 2012 to 2015, direct jobs in the U.S. related to the aftermarket industry increased 3.9%, demonstrating the aftermarket's continued steady growth in the face of drastically changing vehicle technologies. While the industry is currently growing, there are big threats to the industry that the industry is currently dealing with. So now that I have explained the automotive industry and the jobs it creates, I'm going to discuss the threats that tightening regulations pose to the industry. How does the EPA's regulations threaten the future of the automotive industry? Well, according to SEMA in 2021, street vehicles, including cars, trucks, and motorcycles, can't be converted into race cars, according to the EPA. The term race car is a broad term that the EPA uses to define any car that is not stock. A car that is not stock means that this car does not have the same internal or external components as it did when it came from the factory. This means that the EPA has proposed legislation for the enforcement against high-performance parts and their manufacturers, including parts like superchargers, tuners, and exhaust systems. The EPA knows it doesn't have the resources to check every car to see that it has aftermarket parts. Knowing this, they have instead opted to impose heavy fines on the manufacturers and businesses that sell aftermarket parts. While this change doesn't affect big companies, most of the aftermarket performance industry is comprised of small, independent businesses that can't stay afloat if these fines go into effect. Now that I explained why the future of the aftermarket industry is unsure, I'm going to explain what you can do to help. The best way you can possibly help is by contacting your local elected officials and encouraging them to support the RPM Act. You can contact them easily by going to SEMA.com and signing the petition to support the RPM Act. Torque News in 2021 described the RPM Act by stating that the RPM Act clarifies the interpretation of the Clean Air Act, which is a long-standing, environmentally focused piece of legislation. You may still be acting what the RPM is exactly. In my own words, it is documentation that protects the car community from laws that may be oversights by the EPA and makes the impact of these oversights heard by Congress. As I'd wrap up, I'd like to remind you of the topics we covered today concerning the automotive aftermarket industry. First, we defined what the aftermarket industry is and why it's important. Next, we took a look at how the EPA's legislation could harm the industry. And lastly, we explained what you can do to help protect the industry and the jobs it provides. The aftermarket industry is a very important one and that provides jobs to many Americans. It creates jobs that allow for further innovation in the automotive sector, and it's important to create legislation to help protect the car community. Thank you for your time.